Hello, folks. Today we are covering lyric work. In other words, making the words themselves easier to sing. Unfortunately, sometimes we encounter words in songs that maybe the pitch already is tricky. So let's say it's a really high note or a really low note, or even kind of a note in the middle of our voice that feels difficult. And then the lyric that we're singing that pitch on can either help us or hinder us in our ability to sing that easily and powerfully. So I have some sample songs for us, and I have 7 tips that I want to cover with you. We'll kind of bounce around through different song examples, and I'll give you those 7 tips right now so you know what's coming. The entire lesson is an hour. The first 45 minutes are focused on this subject matter, the lyric work specifically, and the last 15 minutes are set aside for Q&A. So if you don't get a question answered sometime within those 45 minutes, then just know that those last 15 minutes are set aside for you. And before I go any further, let me know if you can hear this keyboard. All the notes blending together. Okay, excellent. Thank you so much for letting me know that. Okay, so these 7 tips for making the lyrics easier to sing, and they'll make more sense as we practice with them. The first tip is to train on an easy vowel first. So, what I mean is drop the lyrics completely and sing on something like you could sing on just a vowel. So, you could sing, but what's even easier than that is to add a consonant. So you could sing on ma 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 or ba ba ba. Ma 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 ma. So that's step number 1. And really, no matter what you're doing, no matter what song you're singing, that will probably be a good first step for you. It almost always makes the song easier, and it just simplifies things so that you're working just on tone, pitch, consistency, breathing, whatever the challenge is within that song, you're simplifying so that you're not also dealing with the changing vowels and consonants. Those really make a big difference. So that's tip number 1, and we'll again practice that together. Second tip, and I got this one from a voice teacher that I really love, John Henney. He'll have his students sometimes sing with kind of a robot voice. So once you are adding the lyrics back in, you'll still keep going with that vowel, for example. So let's say you're working on the Star Spangled Banner and you've already sung it on ma 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 or ba ba ba, ma 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 ma. Then your next step, instead of going straight to, oh, say, can you see? You would keep that underneath it. So you would sing, oh, say, can you see? Oh, say, can you see? And of course, you wouldn't leave it like that. That's just a step in the journey. But again, if you're struggling, especially with high notes, that's really, really helpful because you retain this space in your mouth and throat that makes those high notes a lot easier. The third tip is to use your initial consonants for a strong start. So I want to give another example because "Oh say can you see" is not the best example for strong consonants. So let me see what else is in our lineup today. So we have "Amazing Grace" as one of our example songs. And if you haven't heard that one, amazing grace, how sweet the sound. So just analyzing the consonants that we have for the beginning of each pitch. Not a consonant, that's a vowel. Amazing grace. So we have a lot of really strong consonants that are helpful. That in maze, the zing, grace, how. That's not a really strong consonant sound. Sweet, not super strong. The sound. So for a strong start, we can really sink into those initial consonants. And where we don't have an initial consonant, we can almost create one. Um, I'll get into that a little bit more in just a moment. But hi, Sheila and Maud. So here you can try this with me. Saying first just amazing grace and really enjoy those consonants. Try just speaking first. And now add on some pitches. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. So not necessarily the ending consonants, but the beginning consonants. So I think I hit the T of sweet harder than it needed to be hit. But see how that feels. The reason this is helpful is a consonant gives you a little bit of a buildup of air pressure. And you'll feel if you start with a consonant, ba or ma, za, you have more energy than if you just started with a vowel. Ah, ah. When you're singing on just a vowel, it's easy to either start a little bit too breathy, ah, and have a really weak start. It's also easy to go a little bit too far in the other direction, ah, and have too harsh of a start. So, what a consonant does is it gives us naturally a really balanced start. So, again, you can try that out just on the first line of Amazing Grace. Amazing Grace. Really enjoy the z, g. How sweet the sound. That one, not as helpful. um, and you might even feel that. You might feel, I feel a little bit less kind of support and natural energy on the latter half of that phrase than I do with the beginning half. Um, okay, so that was our third tip, and we'll stay with a song to kind of practice all of these tips, but I just want to give you the tips first. So training on an easy vowel, adding lyrics back in with kind of a robot voice, using your initial consonants for a strong start. For unvoiced consonants or even words that start with vowels, consider swapping with a similar voiced version. So let's find an example of that. And by the way, I am looking at a piece of sheet music. Hi, Narcissa. I'm not sure if that is how you say your name. But I I have been on this kind of extended leave to take care of my baby, and that is why my cat fill out a send me a message. So if you want, you can do that. Here, I'll get you my site, and you can send me a message. I schedule lessons very very sparingly based on availability, but I will send you that link so that you can send a message and be on that list for when I do have an opening. Okay, so this was a little bit of a confusing tip, this tip number 4. So um, I I linked there the Amazing Grace sheet music. So we're looking here, Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound. So an example would be actually the very beginning, Amazing Grace. Now, we don't have a consonant there, and if you feel like your start is a little bit shaky, maybe too breathy, what you can do there is start with what we'd call a glottal onset or a glottal attack. That's the sound that you make when you say, uh-oh. So try that and see how there's a little stop in your throat. Uh-oh. So that very sound, you're going to start with that, uh, uh, amaze. And many of you are probably naturally doing that, especially for this word. It's the way that you would naturally start the word apple, for example. You don't usually say apple, you say apple or I. So again, that's a glottal onset that can give you a little bit of the strength that you would get with a consonant. And by that same token, sorry, I'm trying to read read the live chat at the same time. Yes, so Narcisse, you can currently schedule with Abram, but if you want to take with me, that's why I mentioned, you can send me a note on my website, and I can reach out when I have availability. Hopefully that went through. Let me know if that link did not go through. So if you have a consonant that is what we'd call unvoiced, and that means your vocal folds aren't vibrating to make that consonant sound. An example of this would be an S. So if you try that, you're going to feel there's just air coming through. Your vocal folds aren't vibrating. Another one in this song was lost, but now am found. Okay, so the F in found, again, you'll feel that air is passing through, your lips are involved, but your vocal folds are not. So that can be tricky. I don't think it would be a problem in this song, but let's say you have a song where you're jumping to a high note and that high note starts on an S or an F or an H. That can be tricky. So what you can do there is you can swap out that consonant that's unvoiced with a very similar voiced version. So I'm going to use the word found, for example, but now am found. The most similar consonant to an F that does have your vocal folds vibrating is a V sound. And you can see that with your mouth shape too. If you make an F sound and then, engage, you'll see and feel that those are very, very similar to produce. So an F and a V. What you would do is you would add just a little bit of V to the F. But now am found. It doesn't have to be now am vound. You don't really have to sink into the V sound. Okay, good. You're so welcome. So let me know if that makes sense to you. I know this is a little bit of a weird tip, and it takes, I think, a few examples to kind of understand. I believe I have a short lesson on this on the 30-Day Singer channel, and I'm going to see if I can find that link. So I'm going to look up consonants, 30-Day Singer, and see, hopefully it pops up. Okay, here, yep. Okay, so here is the video link, and this is just for more practice with this specific tip of swapping an unvoiced consonant for a voiced one. Okay, I think that's it. All right, next tip. So that was tip number 4. Again, we're going to jump into these songs and practice some more. Tip number 5 is to connect words that end in a consonant and start in a vowel. So, for example, let's go back to this. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch. Okay, so that's a good example. Instead of singing that saved a and having to start that kind of fresh, you could connect saved a wretch. So again, instead of saved a wretch, saved a. So you're flowing from one word to the next. Let me see if there's another good example in this first verse. I once was lost, but now am found. That's kind of one. Now am found instead of now am found. And you'll kind of find If you have experience singing in a choir, you might do this quite naturally because a lot of times you're singing legato, which means smooth and connected. So you might do this naturally, but I found it is such a game changer even for solo singing that you, especially when you're concerned about the start of one word, if it doesn't have a consonant on it, you can connect, you can, um, you know, take the energy from the end of the last word you sang into the next word. And especially if there's a consonant there, you can carry that consonant over. Okay. That was number 5. Number 6 is to elongate your vowels in general. And what I mean by that, we could sing Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound. And of course, I'm exaggerating a little bit. Most people wouldn't sing it that way. But you can hear how the tone, it varies. It doesn't sound open and rich for all that long because I keep closing my mouth. So instead, I can practice elongating the vowels as much as possible. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. So I'm not spending more time than I really need to on the consonants. A caveat here, though, because sometimes you'll hear singers close to the consonant for stylistic effect, and it really sounds good. So, one singer that I can think of who does that quite a lot, one of my favorites, singers from the past, is Nat King Cole. Does that a lot. Frank Sinatra as well. So I'm thinking, jazzy singers and singers inspired by jazz. Uh, they do that a lot. I'm trying to think of an example. Maybe you would sing, "Fly me to the moon," and you wouldn't sing, "Fly me to the moon." You can hear the difference there. One sounds a little bit more classical, proper, and the other sounds a little bit more jazzy and, of that style. So, all that to say, that's a big caveat to say that you can make the stylistic choice to close to the close to the consonant if you think that it sounds good. But in general, the beauty of your singing voice is going to be while you're singing vowels. It's simply more beautiful to hear than z or g, of course. um, and there are some consonants that a beautiful tone can still ring on. Mm, mm. But you'll feel this out for yourself. And last tip before we jump into a song and stay with it for a while, vowel modification. And we have covered this in many other videos. It kind of goes back to the first tip, actually, of starting with dropping the lyrics and singing on an easy vowel like So that's a good start. That's a really good way to start your song work because then vowel modification, it actually feels quite natural. So an example, just to stick with Amazing Grace for one more moment. Let's say you're singing this song, Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound. And you're used to singing it on ma, 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 ma. It's gonna sound and feel a lot more natural for you, ma, to modify that E vowel. That saved a wretch like me. That me feels and sounds a lot more like ma than a pure E vowel. Me. And hopefully it's obvious why we would want to modify that vowel. It's quite thin, quite, kind of a nasal quality to it, and does not sound as open and beautiful as the rest of the line does with, more helpful vowels to set you up. Um, so vowel modification, what that really comes down to is when you have a tricky vowel, you're not modifying every single vowel you sing, but when you have a tricky vowel that maybe feels strained or the tone is off, like I just demonstrated, um, then you can shade that vowel closer to a vowel that sounds more beautiful and feels more relaxed. You can almost always start with or shade toward if you're in trouble. Um, Very rarely will that not help you. So, okay, any questions so far? I do want to put these 7 tips in the chat just in case you can't stay for this whole lesson and you want to write it down and save it for later. Um, so I'm going to literally copy and paste from my notes. So tip number 1, and this is a good time to review, train on an easy syllable. Tip oh, yeah, tip number 1, that's what I meant to say. Tip number 2, robot voice. Tip number 3, use your initial consonants for a strong start. Tip number 4, for unvoiced consonants, swap them with a similar voiced version. And I put the video link up there of a short video where I teach you to do just that and give you more examples. And in case you don't want to scroll backward, I'm going to put the link again. um, okay, that was tip number 4. Tip number 5, connect words that end in a consonant and start with a vowel. And I put an example in there. For all becomes for all. Tip number 6, elongate vowels in general. But of course, you have the option as the singer and the stylist to close to a consonant if you think it sounds cool and isn't doing anything weird. By weird, I mean like the tone is getting, you know, pinched or you're starting to feel strained, because that can also happen. If you close to a consonant, you can start to feel a little pull in your throat. And 7th, vowel modification in general for tricky vowels, shade toward to make it easier. So before we jump into a song and stay there for a little bit, I just want to ask if there are any questions from you lovely folks who are here live. And then we'll jump into a song and see what applies, what we can do with some of these tips. Okay. You can always add a question in later. I'm going to jump. Continue. Will do. So my first example song is The Parting Glass, traditional Scottish song. I have sheet music right here. We'll probably choose a different key for this, but I just wanted the sheet music so that you can see the melody, see the lyrics. And I'll probably put it in the key of C. Yes, yes. Ed Sheeran and I should figure out how to say Hosier also does a really great rendition of that. Um, okay, The Parting Glass. Hey, I'll use Ed Sheeran's chords, might as well. And again, I think I'm going to move this to the key of C. So we should have our first chord as A minor. Hopefully that's good. If that is not at all comfortable for your voice, please let me know. Um, I can move it higher, move it a little bit lower, but I think that should at least be a good starting point for folks. If you have a lower voice and you want to sing one octave lower, you would start there instead of here. So you're starting on E3 of instead of E4 of. And Sheila has a question. How do you keep your resonance intact while singing? Did you mean intact or in back? I realized I might have misread that. So let me know, and we'll address that question. But for now, I'm just going to play the chords so you can hear how it goes. I guess I don't need my pedal because my keyboard is already in back. Okay. In back. Okay. So Sheila, I would say I do this, I think, naturally at this point. I'm not thinking about it just because it's been years of, vocal exercises that instill this. I think that at all times, I am singing with kind of a shade of and that feeling in my throat. So, if we're singing this song, of all the money that e'er I had, what it feels like is I'm retaining kind of the same shape in my mouth and throat instead of, how I would speak those words of all the money that e'er I've had. Of all the money that e'er I had. That's exactly how I would sound if I sang exactly how I spoke. So I think, to reverse engineer that, it comes down to actually doing what we're talking about today, dropping the lyrics and singing on something like ma 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 ba ba ba. Ma 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 ma. Dopey sounds? Yeah. Dopey sounds will help you if you have a tendency to be maybe overly bright or kind of closed off. So you don't necessarily want to stay dopey because then I'll do an example. Let's say, you tend to be overly bright or kind of closed, and then you say, okay, I'm going to use dopey sounds. Bo, 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 and you go really, really dopey. Sometimes what that can lead to down the road, if you over rely on those, is that you're then used to singing with kind of a lower larynx, and you actually start to become afraid of letting the larynx rise or singing loudly or singing with, a good amount of chest voice. So I just want to throw out that caveat because that is a pitfall that I myself have, that's a trap I've fallen into as a singer. And so, so I would say, yes, dopey sounds, but ideally kind of finding that sort of balanced, that isn't super dopey, but is more just, if you're thinking, and then using that, ma 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 ma, of all the money that e'er I had, and using that as you sing. So I hope that's helpful. I'm gonna play the chords now and sing a little bit. Again, I think I put yeah. So I put the PDF for the sheet music here. Again, I'm transposing to key of C. And we'll just do a little bit of this, but we'll see how many of these tips we can apply. Of all the money that e'er I had, I spent it in good companies, and all all the harm that e'er I've done. Alas, it was to none but me. So let's stop right there. Thank you, Sheila. I appreciate that. And yeah, I think that's what we all want is control over what comes out of our mouth. And, it's a fine line between having control, being in control, and also, just singing, just letting ourselves make sound. That's a tricky balance. But okay. So let us go back to our list of tips. So there's the, you know, beginning of this song. If we want to take our first tip and just sing on an easy syllable, I would say ba is a good one to start with. Ma. And if it feels forced to go ba 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 ba, you could ba 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 ba. You don't have to do the consonant on, every single syllable. So, whatever feels natural-ish to you. But the point here is not that you're just singing on this syllable, but that you're also feeling. Like, notice what it feels like, notice what it sounds like. And especially if you've already sung the song on the lyrics, then having that comparison of how it sounds and feels when you sing on something neutral like this ma or ba. So I can sing along with you. I can also just play the chords. I think this time I'll still sing along just in case the melody is new to you, but I'd like to, take a step back from singing so that you can sing alone with the piano. So let's do the first half of this verse. I do see a question and I will answer it shortly. But let's try this on ma 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 or ba ba ba. And I'll give you a 1, 2, 3, go. Of all. All right. But mama. 1, 2, 3, go. Mama, 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 mama. Mama, 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 mama. Okay. Let your voice flip and yodel. It's totally appropriate in this song. So hopefully that felt a little bit more relaxed, a little less complicated than singing on the lyrics. Okay, 2 questions here. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, these lesson times when you're, halfway around the world, that's tricky. But gosh, I don't have a good answer for getting one-on-one time since this window is what I've got available right now. I know Abram has a different window that he does his live lessons in. I think maybe he's doing like 4 PM or 5 PM Pacific, but that would be even later for you. But yeah, I don't know. I hope that there's, enough lessons on here that you can learn from at your own pace. That's the hope. Um, and while I'm getting older, will my tone change? It's difficult for me to adapt from high to low. What's the best thing? Um, so age certainly will affect your tone. And you might find that your range, changes a little bit too. So difficult adapting from high to low. I would do you mean adapting from like having a higher voice to having a lower voice? Is that what you mean? Because that's a really common thing for, voices as they age to get a little bit deeper. I guess my first thing and, my voice has changed a little bit as I've gotten older. And I would say embracing the new songs that you can sing with maybe some of those newfound low notes and getting some examples of singers that are inspirational to you and that you really love the tone of within this new range and even within this new age group as well. I think, it's really difficult. It's difficult even for me, if I want to sing along with like a high school singer, like an Olivia Rodrigo. That's a different voice type, different age, and that is not as natural of a fit. So, whatever age you are, I would find a singer or group of singers, in that same age group and with a similar voice type so that you can be inspired by them and not stuck, kind of trying to fit in old jeans, so to speak. Um, that would be my main piece of advice for you. And then beyond that, of course, continuing to exercise your voice because what happens with our bodies and with our voices as we age is we get out of the routine of exercising. And so, exercising your voice, of course, is different than exercising your body, but making sure that you are covering your full range, whatever that is. Singing through a straw is a great way to do that, doing glides and sirens, up and down and making that a part of your almost daily, if not daily, routine. That way, you're not getting rusty and inflexible. And Wayne, what consonant can I substitute to jump up to a high she? Since the sh sound is hard to set up. Yeah, absolutely. So I would ask first, Wayne. Okay, so first the swap would be adding a little bit of zh sound because that's the same way that we make a sh. So if it's she, adding a little bit of that soft j, zh. Um, Beyond that, though, the vowel is going to make a huge difference. So instead of an E, a really spread thin E, you might first sing on, let's say, ja, ja, and then let your tongue make the E sound, I, without closing the mouth. So again, you can try this also, Wayne. Try this on a lower pitch. So you don't have to do all of this work on the actual note. You can try it on a lower pitch. So you can do you know, I, where you're just practicing keeping that nice tall shape and letting your tongue make the E sound instead of going I. So really it's just the tongue moving up and forward. Um, so that's number one, add a little zh to the sh sound. Number two, let the tongue do the work for the E articulation without losing that shape and feeling in the throat. And then third, I would ask, is there a final consonant that you're coming through? Coming from. So if it was, yeah, you can let me know what the lyric is, and maybe it's unhelpful. I guess fourth tip for you would be sliding into the pitch a little bit. So maybe it is a jump and you have to hit it straight on. She, but a lot of times singers will sneak into a high note, she, with a little bit of a slide. I know we don't want to do that all the time. It can get a little schmaltzy if we're always sliding into notes. But singers do it all the time, and you can use that, especially if it's tricky. Just bend from slightly below. Okay, and Sheila's asking, is there a lesson on phrasing? I seem to not have enough air to finish my phrases. I keep running out. Yeah. So there are certainly lessons on phrasing and breath, and they are absolutely connected. So I would say, uh, if you go to, I can do this as well, but if you go to the channel and then search specifically, breathing or running out of breath, and then see what videos come up in the on the channel specifically, that'll be an easier way to search than if you're just searching YouTube, lots of other stuff is going to come up. Okay, so back to the parting glass. I'm going to skip tip 2. So tip 2 was adding lyrics back with kind of robot voice underneath everything. I'm going to combine these next few tips. So using your initial consonants for a strong start. Let's analyze here. Again, we don't start with a consonant, we start with a vowel. So what we might want to do is start with a glottal onset. Remember, that's the uh-oh sound. Of all, or maybe you don't need that. Of all the money, and you just want a nice balanced start. That's cool too. Of all the money. Here we have kind of a natural carrying over of the last consonant into the next word. Of all instead of all. Of all. You're really saying of all the money that e'er I had. And there too, instead of singing that e'er I had, you can sing that e'er I had. It's simply easier to kind of keep your energy going than to have this stop and start. To make it really, really obvious, if we sang, I've spent it in good company. Having all that stopping and starting, it's exhausting. Versus, I've spent it in good company. And that's not to say that you can never pause or, restart. But I find, it sounds better. It's not as chopped up. And it's also just easier. So, going back to what Sheila was saying about breathing and phrasing, it's helpful to be able to plan, to plan that you're going to take this breath and then make it last through to the end of the phrase. Okay. Another kind of calling back to our tips from before. So using our initial consonants, unvoiced consonants, swapping, connecting words that end in a consonant and start in a vowel, elongating the vowels in general. So for this song, actually, I do think it's stylistically appropriate to sometimes close to the consonant. So, in the very beginning, for example, of all the money. That sounds right. And if I elongate the vowels, make it really choral and proper, of all the money. It doesn't have the same feeling. So it really is a stylistic choice. But I'm probably not going to go, I've spent it in good company. I might not do it all the time. I might do it here and there just for some variety. And then our last tip here, modifying vowels that are tricky. And I'd love to ask you, as you sing through this song, were there any vowels that felt or sounded maybe strained, maybe, less than ideal? The song does go on and has, a little bit of higher notes as well. So when we sing, "Thus it was to none but me," and then we have kind of the, I guess, what feels like the chorus, "and all I've done for want of wit." That's an example. and all I've done. I would probably connect all I've done instead of singing and all I've done, and all I've done, all live. And then for want of wit, if you're struggling with that, I would add a little bit of V sound. For want of wit. To memory now, I can't recall. There's another chord in there. So fill to me the parting glass. Good night and joy be with you all. I can imagine, perhaps, if you're singing this song, the good night and joy, that might be a tricky line for a couple reasons. Good night and. So, number one, it's a jump. Night and. Number two, you are jumping to a vowel and instead of having a consonant for strength to start. And third reason, you have a wide vowel and your mouth is in a wide shape. And if you tend to kind of pull up chest voice or sing with a lot of intensity, you might kind of be shouting good night and maybe cracking. So, hi, Nick. So if you're encountering any of those issues, I would say we've got tips earlier in the lesson that address each one. So first, connecting night and I would even combine tips. So instead of night, it could be night with a little bit of a d sound. Good night and night and. So that's one. And two. And then third, modifying that vowel. So instead of and really wide, you could actually use the shape that you have on night. Good night and night and. So it's a little bit more like end than and. So if you're singing this and that's a spot where maybe you were feeling a little bit strained or voice was cracking, I would try that combination of tips. Connect, maybe use a little d instead of t, and then night and instead of night and. Okay. As we are nearing the end, I can jump into another song, but I also want to just throw out the questions. If you've got questions, now's your chance. And let me see what else is on our list. Ooh, blue skies. Okay, I'm going to jump into blue skies, but of course, I will prioritize questions. So this one, it's a jazz standard, classic. Many people have done it. I don't even know whose version would be the most popular, but anyways. So it's goes, if you haven't heard it, blue skies smiling at me, nothing but blue skies do I see. So just looking at that first phrase, let's analyze if there's anything tricky in there lyrically. And there's the sheet music for you. We're in the key of C minor. I don't know how the vowel on skies feels to you. But one thing that we did not cover, interestingly, is the concept of diphthongs, a diphthong being a double vowel sound. So blue, that's just a single vowel. Ooh, blue. Skies is two. So it's a plus e. Sky. And what you might find, blue skies. You, especially if you're chest voicing this, blue skies. If you go from that ah, which is pretty easy to sing high with chest voice or, chesty mix, and an E, not easy to sing. Blue skies, blue skies. And I'm not even trying to make my voice crack. I'm just letting it crack because that is naturally what happens when we go from this nice open shape to a really closed E shape. So, 2 tips here. First is it kind of goes along with the elongating the vowels, but we get more specific which vowel we elongate when we have a diphthong. So when we have a diphthong, in general, you want to elongate the first part. So if sky is ah plus e, we're elongating the ah. Blue skies. And then we're minimizing the e. Blue skies smiling at me. So we're almost barely going to the E of skies. So it's more skies smiling at me. Okay. And then the me smiling at me. Depending on how you want to sing that E vowel could be kind of tricky. So that would be an instance for vowel modification, probably toward a. And, circling back to what we helped Wayne with, you can use that shape and then just let the tongue make the I, let the tongue make the E sound. The rest of that phrase, and Nick, I will get to those questions. Nothing but blue skies. I think I just changed keys. Nothing but blue skies do I see. I don't really feel like there's anything terribly tricky in that. But you can see, hopefully this is a good example for you to see it's not just the pitches, it's not just where they fall in your voice. The lyrics can really make a difference in whether it's easy to sing or challenging. But the good thing is, and hopefully the main takeaway of this lesson is that you do have power in how you sing the lyrics. You can really finesse them to make them work for you. And some songs are just easier than others because of the lyrics. So Nick was saying, out of interest, was there a point in your singing career where you had to change your overall style? For example, I solely relied on singing rock songs and now it's just ballads more for endurance, or has it always been a consistent style or genre for you? That's a great question. So I would say my style has changed based on my interest, what I was doing at the time. So in high school, I was doing a lot of musical theater and also pop. And so there was a lot of belting in my life. And then in college, okay, so interest and also necessity, because then in college, and I've definitely shared this story before, we were required to take 2 years of classical lessons before doing anything contemporary. And so I had to, sing operatic songs, arias, and art songs with very, very little experience or comfort with my head voice. And I hated it. I really, really hated it. And that forced me, though, to start using my head voice and to develop a stronger facility with mix. So it ended up being a blessing in disguise. But I didn't really fall in love with classical music during that time, but I did develop an appreciation for it and definitely an appreciation for how my voice felt when relying a little bit more on head voice. And also, as you say, endurance. I also was, in choirs where we had hours and hours of practice, and my voice wouldn't last if I was just trying to chest voice everything. So, and I would stick out too, within a choir. So it was necessity. But then I kind of found this beautiful middle ground with jazz singing, because jazz, more than musical theater and more than pop, um, there just seemed to be like a wider, like a bigger bucket of what was allowed. There was belting, but there was head voice and there was soft, um, mixing and, lows and highs. There was just, more color, more variety. And so I found that really, really attractive. And there happened to be, a great singer, bass player who gave lessons at my school. And so immediately, I was a freshman in college and immediately signed up with her. I did it kind of behind the back of the classical teacher that I was taking from. Um, because they did have this like 2-year rule, like 2 years of classical before you do any contemporary, and I just signed up. And so my second semester of freshman year, I was taking a unit of classical and a unit of jazz. And that jazz singing was my lifeline because I was good at it and I wasn't good at the classical stuff, certainly, at the beginning. And it was never like what I did best. So, anyways, I would say that was a big, probably the biggest shift in my style as a singer, was out of necessity, but then also interest leading me to jazz. And so then, you know, kind of settling in the like jazzy, folky vein that I've comfortably lived in for a while. But yeah, it's a great question and takes me back. Okay, so with our last few minutes, any other questions, you are welcome to throw them in the chat. Let's see if there are any other weird uh, lyric things that come up, anything else that I forgot to cover. And if you did join late, you can, you know, scroll backward in the live chat. And I put all of the 7 tips that we covered in the chat. So if you see, the little 30-day singer icon 7 or 8 times in a row, um, you'll see those tips in order. And there was, yeah, I think 8, because one of them was a video link to a shorter lesson that goes into the whole voiced, unvoiced consonant. And I gave credit in that video to the teacher that I learned that from, Gerald White, but I don't think I mentioned him here. So definitely credit to him, because I was clueless about that before I attended a workshop with him. And he said that was the most valuable thing he learned in his schooling, in his music education degree. So I was like, wow, it was super cool, and I never had come across it. Okay, so the next bit, bluebird singing a song. Okay, another thing that that we didn't cover but is related. Nah, we covered it. Is this R sound. Bluebirds. For some pitches and some styles, that sound is going to be helpful, and for others, it is not. So play with it. It might be a situation where you elongate the vowel and you sing blue buh for a long time until you finally finish the word. Bluebird singing a song. And not even buh. I kind of did more buh. Bluebird singing a song. Or you really sink into that R, bluebird birds singing a song. And if you like the sound of that, you could totally do that. Again, it's jazz, so it's kind of either goes. Either feels appropriate. Uh, Nothing but bluebirds all day long. And here too, when we're talking about elongating vowels, singing a song versus singing a song. I might not do it there, but all day long. I'm trying to look for an example of where it sounds good to close to the consonant. Never saw the sun shining so bright. Maybe there, instead of never saw the sun shining so bright, maybe closing to the N. Never saw the sun shining so bright. Never saw things going so right. Yeah, I like that. Never saw things. Closing to the NG of things. So again, this is not a right or wrong thing. It's just it's style. It's how you want to play with it, and just being aware that usually elongating the vowel is the most beautiful, like the safest bet. But it's fun to close to the consonant. Okay. Unfortunately, I have to let you go. Next week, I will be back and talking about vocal health and vocal maintenance. And I hope you can join for that. I hope if you join for just part of this, you'll jump back. It was a lot of kind of examples throughout. We used Amazing Grace, The Parting Glass, a little bit of Blue Skies here at the end. I don't know if we got to another, but yeah, hopefully you got some tidbits that will help you with your song work. Thank you for being here, Wayne. Nick, I will see you guys. All right. Bye-bye.